Hello, Petal. How you doing? How was your weekend? How's everything going? Much apologies for not being there this weekend, as I really was looking forward to doing. Unfortunately, a email late at night on Friday did actually, meaning that it did send my carefully structured plans for the entire weekend were pretty much shot to cock. But I'm glad I did go over, because if I hadn't gone over, I wouldn't be able to have a chat to my mum. So I know what parents are like. They're always like, oh, I didn't want to worry you. Worry away. Seriously. Anywho, I digress. How are you doing? As ever, please leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know how things are going on. I am very sorry. I was really looking forward to a live stream on Saturday. But we will, if all else fails, get to do a live stream again. And many more. Because I want to. And that'll make it happen. So hopefully things are settling down a bit, but it has been a time of one thing after another. As you know, life is wont to do, and what do? We just suck it up and crack on. We do our best. So, chapter 17, Faust Among Equals, is a hefty one. Please bear with me throughout this chapter. If you want to listen in two goes, absolutely fantastic. If you want to leave a like and subscribe and share, oh, even better, that's absolutely glorious. And as ever, if you could hit the notifications bell, it helps keep the hamsters happy and the lights on. Right then, we'd best get on with it, hadn't we? Chapter 17. Oh, me? Lucky George leant forward slightly. A persuasive enough man at the best of times. He was giving it everything he'd got. An Arab coming up against George in this frame of mind would have found himself the bewildered owner of many cubic tons of very expensive sand. Yes, Lenny, he cooed. You've got just what it takes to be a success in politics, hasn't he, Helen? I mean, you'd vote for him, wouldn't you? Like a shot, Helen replied, not looking up from her calisthenics book. She'd just got to the bit where the heroine had wrapped her left leg around her neck, with the heels sticking in her right ear, and she wanted to find out how the hell the author was going to engineer a happy ending out of that lot. There, you see, the women's vote tied up, just like that. Come on, Lenny, don't be a loser all your life, just for once. I dunno. Leonardo da Vinci stroked his beard. A full-time job in itself. To be absolutely frank with you, George, I don't think I'm really, qualified to stand, not eligible. Lucky George gestured impatiently. Rubbish, he said. What on earth gave you that impression, Len? Well, said Leonardo, counting on his fingers. Number one, I'm Italian. I always thought that to be president of the USA, you had to be American. George laughed. No problem, he said. We get you US citizenship first, naturally. And then, of course, you've got the Italian vote sewn up before you even start. Retrospectively even, Helen murmured. Nobody heard her. Also, Leonardo went on, I'm dead. So? Leonardo waved his hands feebly. So, I guess that's not exactly going to inspire confidence in the electorate, George. I mean, vote for Da Vinci. He would have made a good president if only he'd lived. Isn't the best sort of platform you could... On the contrary, George replied. Look at the Kennedys. Secret of their success, that was. Leonardo shrugged. Odd you should have mentioned them, he said. Did you know that it was really the Milk Marketing Board who were behind the... Besides, George went on, ignoring him. There you are, dead, running for the White House. That's a disabled vote in the can, right from the word go. Plus, being dead, I guess that makes you a sort of minority group figure. Being dead? A minority? You're crazy, man. There's millions of us out there. Yes, George replied, but not that many of you down here. That's the whole point. Being dead, you say. That really gives you an insight into the problems of the victims of bigotry, because when you're dead, you add every man's hand is against you. Segregation, reservation, cheap dead trash. You got it absolutely made, Lenny. You really have. The only thing that surprises me is why you hadn't stood before.
Better things to do with your time, probably.
Be quiet, Helen. You're not helping. Come on, Lenny. What have you got to lose?
All right.
Leonardo backed away slightly.
But anyway, isn't it a bit academic? I mean, the election's tomorrow. There really isn't time.
George smiled.
Is that all you're worried about? He said. Look, I anticipated you'd jump at the chance, so I took the precaution of registering you as a candidate.
You did what?
Retrospectively, of course. Easy if you know how. And before you say you haven't got time to do any campaigning, I managed to get you on the Ed Sullivan Show. He's a friend of mine. It wasn't a problem. So, you'll have at least 15 minutes prime time. That ought to be enough. The trouble with most campaigns is, you see, they're too long.
But,
which reminds me, said Lucky George, you're on air in about 20 minutes, so if I were you, I'd be getting along.
With retrospect, the pundits say, it was clear the moment the Utah results came in that it was going to be a Da Vinci landslide. By 3:20 a.m, the results were in from 14 states. All had voted Da Vinci. By 5 a.m, it was all over. Interviewed on the Johnny Carson show later that fateful day and asked to explain why the pollsters had once again got it completely wrong, the head of the Gallup organisation said in his defence that the election had turned on factors which couldn't have been foreseen at the time the polls were taken. Such factors as, among others, A personal endorsement of the Da Vinci platform by the Mona Lisa, interviewed live on NBC 5 minutes before voting began. B, the invasion of New York by hundreds of thousands of strange, unearthly, gibbering fiends threatening to burn the city down if Da Vinci wasn't elected. C, the simultaneous withdrawal by all the other candidates, accompanied by a passionate appeal from each one to vote for Da Vinci and a better America. And if that was not enough, he continued, wiping his forehead with a large red silk handkerchief, there was the intrinsic merit of the Da Vinci Manifesto to consider. Admittedly, it had only been released hours before the election, but its basic inspired simplicity made that a plus rather than a minus. When a guy stands up and says, "Listen, America, all we need to do in order to stop inflation, restore full unemployment, revitalise the dollar, put the USA back in her rightful place as the leader of the free world, and give our enemies a stomping they'll never forget, is to link up every building from the Rockies to the Rio Grande with a network of steel scaffolding pipes, not forgetting to install at least 10 heavy-duty cup hooks on all roofs, gable ends and porches at the same time, and there's no way you are going to lose." Well, with a message like that, even Jimmy Carter could have got elected. At which point, the pollster's eyes seemed to glaze over, and he sat motionless in his chair with an expression of extreme bewilderment until the ads came and covered his embarrassment. The only other dissident voice to be heard that day was that of a caller to a low-rent phone-in show broadcast in a small-town radio station somewhere in the back end of Iowa. Giving his name as Danny Bennett and his address as the Burning Fiery Pit, the caller claimed that the Da Vinci victory was the result of gross electoral manipulation using magic, necromancy and other forms of unconstitutional inducement on the part of one Lucky George Faust, a fugitive from hell with a colossal price on his head. The caller was in the middle of a confused tirade about international hitmen and plots against his life, rather peculiarly narrator's note, I can never say that flipping word. Rather phrased in a peculiar manner in the past tense. When the workmen installing the steel girders to link the radio station building with the delicatessen next door dug through a telephone cable, cutting the caller off. Since 90% of the calls to any local radio phone-in anywhere are comprised of this sort of material, none of the show's 7 listeners took the slightest bit of notice.
Great,
said Lucky George, switching off the television.
Now all we need are the balloons.
Repossessing a country is not perhaps the more straightforward of operations. It ought to be, but it isn't. In theory, the bailiff goes along to the head of a state with the necessary paperwork and delivers it, and that should be that. What's then supposed to happen is that the population leave the country in question, taking with them all movable items, but no fixtures, fittings, mineral resources, or growing plants or trees, by 12 noon of the day specified in the court order. Tenants' improvements are then set off against dilapidations, and any sum required to be paid to either party by way of adjustment is lodged with the court office pending a final decision by the arbitration officer. In practice, though, there is always hassle and not infrequently trouble, sometimes even violence. That is why most repossessions these days are handled not by the everyday court bailiff, but by a firm of specialist certified bailiffs, of which there is one, Kurt Lundqvist Associates. Once Lundqvist is on the job, things move fast. His record for clearing a country is 39 seconds, although in fairness we ought to point out that it wasn't a particularly big country. Certainly not by the time he'd finished with it. Lundqvist attributes his success in this line of work to forward planning, executive efficiency, a calm and reasonable attitude towards the resolution of difficulties, and an absolutely fucking enormous satellite-mounted industrial laser capable of vaporising a landmass down to bedrock level at the rate of 325,000 square miles per hour. He calls it the Denver blowtorch. Maybe, he says, it makes a mess of buildings, infrastructures and, indeed, mountain ranges. On the positive side, however, it clears up unsightly litter deposits, disinfects unhygienic areas, and leaves a pleasant, glossy, smooth surface all ready for the new tenant to build what he likes on it. After all, he argues, the first thing you do when you buy a house is strip off the wallpaper and take up the old carpets. Right down at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, the deepest point in the whole of the ocean, there is no light whatsoever. The strange and uncanny creatures that grope out a nightmare existence down there at 15 tons per square inch pressure are born, live and die without even rudimentary traces of eyes, although there are two schools of thought as to why. Narrate is no ever seen a bloodfish. The cutest things, oh my goodness. Not so much when they're out of the water, but certainly in the water. I digress. As to the lack of eyes, one school of thought says, no light, why bother? The other replies, if you'd ever seen one of those weird buggers they've got down there, the last thing you'd want any truck with ever again is vision. When working on the bottom of the trench, therefore, it's vitally important to remember to bring a torch. What, me, Skip? I haven't bought it. Sorry, I thought you'd got it.
I haven't got it, Keith. You got the torch. Not me, Skip. I thought Vernon was going to bring it. Fine.
I see. You thought about that, Skip? I can't see a thing.
I was speaking figuratively.
The three spectral engineers, recently transferred at their own request from the security division, trod slime for a moment, reviewing the situation.
Bloody dark down here, Skip. All right, so it's a bit dimpsy. We'll just have to do the best we can. We seem to do rather a lot of that, Skip, if you don't mind me saying so.
It's what we're best at, replied his colleague proudly, muddling through.
Right, now look, maybe we haven't exactly got off to a copybook start here, but so long as we all keep our heads and don't go all to pieces, this is going to be a piece of cake, all right? Or would you rather go back to playing Seek and Destroy with Kurt Lundqvist?
There was a heavy silence.
It's dogginess, does it, Skip? That's what I always say. You bloody liar, Keith. what you always say is, oh my God, we're all going to die. With good reason, Skip, be fair.
Excuse me?
What?
Would this help?
The other two turned and became conscious of a light. Not a wholesome, help you see in the dark sort of light, more your ghastly livid green glow. It proceeded from the tail of a sort of flatfish thing, a flatfish that is such as EuroBosch might have thought up on one of his gloomier days, and then painted over because it gave him the willies.
Stone me, Vern,
gasped the captain.
What the hell have you got there? It's awful.
It's a fish, Skip, with a light in its tail. I thought it might come in handy, Skip, instead of a torch.
All right. You hold the, thing while we do the hole.
In order to dig holes in the bottom of the deepest point in the ocean, you need a large cordless drill, an enormously long drill bit, and a pressure hose to blast away millions of years of accumulated undisturbed slime, and, of course, the chuck key for the drill.
Right, Keith,
panted the captain.
Give me the chuck key, and I'll just... Now, hold on a minute, Skip. You know perfectly well you've got the... Oh, shit!
Excuse me again, Skip, but would this be any good?
The other two engineers turned and stared. Basically, it was a sort of depraved-looking crab with the most peculiarly shaped tail.
This is bloody ridiculous,
muttered the captain.
Dead handy, though. There's still no guarantee it'll fit.
The captain grumbled.
I mean, it might be a metric size or something.
It wasn't. Nor, unlike your common garden inanimate chucky, did it slip out of your hand just when you're giving it that last half-turn and hide under the workbench. The captain dabbed the trigger button lightly, thereby confirming that all systems were operational.
Lads,
he said quietly, just before setting drill to rock,
don't you get the funny feeling that things are going a bit too well on this job?
The drill screamed and started to bite. As he guided the thing, the captain could feel his whole body juddering and stretching as the vibrations twanged through him and out into the water all around.
Skip!
What is it? The captain screamed. You'll have to shout. I can't hear you very well because of the noise of this thing.
I said, Skip.
Yes, I heard that bit.
Well, that's all I'd said so far.
Then carry on.
The captain screamed above the sound of the drill, whining in the rock like a baby tyrannosaurus with wind.
Try maintain the admirable standard of narrative clarity you've set yourself up till now.
Sorry.
It's all right. I was only...
It's very hard to hear you, Skip, because of the drill. Can you speak up a bit?
Yes, get on with it.
The spectral engineer shrugged.
I just wanted to ask, Skip, why are we doing this?
The captain shuddered horribly. The drill had just touched on something it couldn't cut, and the side effects radiated out across the seabed, giving rise to Duff's seismographic readings right across the world.
Good question,
he said, as soon as his teeth had stopped waltzing about in his mouth.
Something to do with this EuroBosch thing, they told me. Apparently, he wants to tap into this lot for the fountains in the main courtyard.
I think, said the other spectral engineer, it's for drains or something like that. The other two looked at him.
Drains? This hole we're digging. It's either drains or telephone wires. One or the other. Stands to reason.
The spectral engineer asserted confidently.
You reckon?
You should have, Skip. Why else do people dig holes? The captain paused, drill in hand, the light from the flatfish making strange shadows on the ocean floor. Why do people dig holes, he wondered. Graves, man-traps, planting landmines, because they get told to, mostly. And, of course, trains. He straightened his back and looked around. Nothing to be seen except the solid walls of the darkness all around them.
As simple as that,
he said at last.
Yeah, no hidden or ulterior motive. Why should there be?
The captain shrugged and repositioned the drill bit in the hole.
No reason, he said. It just seems too, well, normal to me. Useful too.
The drill made contact, and there was a long interval of screeching metal, spine-jarring vibrations, and Keith whistling, the latter audible despite the captain jamming the drill onto full speed. Then something gave way, and before the captain could call out, "I think we're through, lads," the water around them started to seethe and boil. Like the emptying of God's bath, it gurgled, whirlpooled and sucked. The drill, the 3 engineers and 40,000 tons of yucky black goo were swept up and swallowed whole. The last 2 thoughts to pass through the captain's mind before the whirlpool got him and catapulted him into the whole tedious rigmarole of temporary death and routine reincarnation were, maybe we've drilled a little bit too deep. And then, funny, I didn't remember seeing Lundqvist anywhere. Water. Mother Nature's flexible jackhammer. Billions of gallons of the stuff, enough to fill all the swimming pools in Beverly Hills, roaring and burping down a molybdenum-steel drain towards the centre of the earth. Ronnie Bosch was proud of that drain, not because it was a miracle of engineering, walls only 90,000 thick but proved to 26 tons per square inch, machined solid out of one of the pillars used for thousands of years to support the sky until they discovered it stayed up there perfectly happily of its own accord, more because he'd managed to get it made and installed in 12 hours flat, and nobody had even troubled to ask him what he wanted it for. When you've been used to having to sign 4 pink jets and a green requisition every time you want your pencil sharpened, it comes as a little bit of a shock. Makes you think, really. Anyway, down the water went until it emerged in the form of white high-velocity spray in an enormous cauldron arrangement, seated slap bang above Hell-Holding PLC's very latest state-of-the-art No. 6 furnace. Let nobody say that the management buyout hasn't led to some pretty radical changes in the way Hell operates. No. 6 furnace is one of the new regime's most impressive showpieces. By the simple expedient of converting it to oil burning from the Sabbath breaker burning, it has been possible to double calorific output and half running costs, thereby saving enough to finance a whole new Sabbath breaker's wing equipped with the latest in microwave technology. Just to add to the ingenuity of it all, the electricity to power the microwaves comes from a steam turbine built into No. 6, resulting in further savings, which in turn pay for 24-hour round-the-clock canned laughter in the extremely unpleasant corner of the Hell complex set aside for game show hosts. It was because of the steam turbine that Ronnie Bosch had routed the water down on No. 6. A few surreptitious modifications here and there were enough to divert the steam from the boiler away from the turbines and up another molybdenum-sealed tube. Narrator's note, I really have problems with that word too. Molybdenum. Bigger and better than the first, proof to an incredible 37 tons per square inch, running straight up through the Earth's core and coming out in an expansion chamber several thousand feet under North America. The rest of the design was basically very simple. The rising steam powered a piston. The piston went up. And all across America, in the cool stillness of the early evening of the day before the balers were due to move in, people out walking were tripping over enormous steel girders that hadn't been there an hour or so earlier and wondering what on earth was going on. Then they remembered. They remembered that, for reasons which at the time had seemed very cogent, they had voted into the White House a centuries-dead Italian inventor whose sole proposal to the electorate had been that every building in the USA be rigidly attached to its neighbour with bloody great big steel rods. America loves cleverness. In a land where inventors of better mousetraps really do have 6-inch deep ruts worn in the tarmac of their driveways, a man who can come up with an entirely practical plan for doing something previously thought to be impossible must inevitably become the hero of the hour. even if the thing he's able to do is something nobody would ever have dreamed of doing in the first place. Otherwise, how do you explain Mount Rushmore, or the space program, or the atomic bomb? Even the skeptics had to admit it was a goddamn colossal achievement. To take just one example, between Las Vegas and the small but by no means indispensable township of Pahrump, Nevada, lie 15 miles of tire-meltingly hot desert, scarcely improved in terms of habitability by having a range of 12,000-foot razor-edge rocks fatuously named the Spring Mountains, running slap bang through the middle. It's a sort of geographical entity that can only be fitted into the Christian worldview by accepting that somewhere around lunchtime on the third day of creation, he stopped for a breather and left a few bits for the Youth Opportunities lad to finish off. Yet, within 15 hours of the Da Vinci Act becoming law, Pahrump had been welded onto Vegas by a single continuous high-tensile steel link with spurs off it at intervals to connect in the few outlying homesteads in the middle of the desert. In fact, the whole Sierra Nevada was covered with what looked from the air like silver varicose veins, glinting and twinkling in the dazzling desert sun and playing merry hell with satellite TV reception from Bakersfield to Redding. Or take the vast single-span bridges connecting, and please excuse any pronunciations here, Immokalee, Florida, with Clewiston, Sunnylands, and Fort Myers, arrow straight across the soggiest excesses of the Big Cypress Swamp, the massive iron beam supporting Riley, Oregon, between Burns and Wagon Tire, the absurd lengths gone to in order to attach the Wolf Point, Montana, securely to its neighbours, or, on another plane entirely, the scintillating spider's webs of carbon steel enveloping Brooklyn, San Francisco, Chicago, and similar hamlets. A message banged out on the girders in Morse code in the northern suburbs of Seattle could, in theory, be picked up by someone with a stethoscope in San Diego or Miami or Boston, although it would probably be just as easy to telephone. And America said to itself, "Hey, we did that. Hey, why did we do that?" "Fine," said Lucky George, replacing the receiver. "Well?"
"Sounds like Lenny's side of things is tied up all right. Ronnie's part..."
He glanced at his watch and nodded.
"If everything's running on time, Ronnie's part should already be underway. Any word yet from Larry and Mike?"
Helen nodded. "They called in about 3 minutes ago. It's all ready."
"Good."
Lucky George pulled out the original envelope on which the whole thing had been sketched out and ran his finger down it, checklist fashion.
"And Chris is ready to cover all the legal stuff?"
"He's waiting outside the registry right now."
"Martin and Julius got their people in position?"
"Standing by."
"That's all right then."
Lucky George folded up the envelope, sat down on the sofa, and put his feet up.
"I could murder a coffee if you're making one."
Helen folded her arms and frowned. "Hold on," she said. "While everyone else is hard at it, what precisely are you going to do?"
George smiled. "Nothing," he said. "And everything too, of course, but only after I've had my coffee. 2 sugars, please, and a digestive biscuit."
It was, needless to say, the biggest moment in all the 17 years of Lynx Jostopian's life. "Scanners," he commanded. "On." There is a convention that people who sit in front of screens giving orders have to speak funny. It's all activate thruster motors and uncouple forward connecting gear and initiating docking routine. Anybody in the least self-conscious about sounding a complete nana wouldn't last 5 minutes.
"Scanning,"
said one of the men in wide cords.
"All functions normal for phase 2 initiation."
Up above, the world so high, like a death ray in the sky, the Denver blowtorch was muttering drowsily. A few lights began to flash here and there on its titanium carapace, like the jewels with which a dragon's belly is reputedly encrusted. It bleeped, twitched in its orbit, and dreamed strange dreams. Radio waves crackled off it into spears like the hairs of a molting cat.
For crying out loud, it broadcast to the barren cosmos. There's some of us trying to sleep.
Lynx consulted his watch. It was a pity that his Spederco combat chronometer had taken this day of all days to fall into the bath and get all clogged up with suds, because this was just the sort of special mission he'd bought it for. $14.95 plus postage. As it was, he'd had to rummage around in his dad's bedside drawer for his spare, the one he got free with 5 litres of oil at the gas station. It worked fine, sure, so far as telling the time was concerned and all that stuff. But it wasn't black parkerized steel, and it didn't have a camouflage strap with a built-in compass. Sometimes, Lynx reflected bitterly, life can be so unfair.
Hello, Mr. Lundqvist. Are you receiving me? This is Lynx here, Mr. Lundqvist. Ready when you are, Mr. Lundqvist. Mr. Lundqvist.
He was just about to try again, only louder, when the reply came in through the headphones. It took the form of an urgent request for radio silence until further notice, combined with a warning as to the anatomically complex consequences of non-compliance.
Sorry, Mr. Lundqvist, Lynx replied. I didn't mean to speak so loud. Is that any better? Gee, I hope I haven't spoiled things. I'd feel really bad if...
Lynx?
Yes, Mr. Lundqvist, I'm here.
Shut up.
Yes, Mr. Lundqvist, I'm receiving you, over and out.
Nothing to do, apparently, except wait. Lynx gazed round the operations room, his eye passing over the banks of computer consoles and the white-coated boffins behind them. So far, he hadn't got to the part in the course that dealt with stealthy waiting, but he felt confident that, with his newly acquired skills, he'd be able to work it out for himself from first principles. Waiting. Well, for a start, he obviously didn't just sit there like a sack of tatties. Any dumb civilian could do that. Presumably you had to wait like a coiled spring, concentrating the mind's potential energy and regulating the adrenaline flow. Probably there was one of those mystic Eastern things you could do, but that was most likely somewhere around lesson 36. Lynx focused his mind and tried to imagine the sound of 2 hands clapping. It had said 1 hand in the book, but that was obviously a misprint. Just as he was getting the hang of it, clap, 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 a light flashed on the console. Incoming message from Operative 1.
Operative 1, this is Guadalajara Central, he said brightly. Guadalajara Central receiving you. Come in, Operative 1. Over.
Yeah, said the voice. This is Maury Goldman here. Can I talk to Mr. Lundqvist, please?
Lynx frowned.
Negative, Operative 1.
He paused, trying to translate what he wanted to say into command speak. He gave up. Too difficult.
Mr. Lundqvist isn't here right now. Can I take a message?
What? Oh, sure. Look, this is Goldman. I'm just about to go in and serve the possession notice right now. Have you guys standing by because I have this feeling the tenants aren't going to be too happy.
Receiving you, Operative 1. Confirm all systems are operational. Awaiting clearance to proceed. Over.
Yeah. Well, the voice hesitated. Just tell him I called, okay?
Positive. Missive received and logged. Over and out.
Maury Goldman hung up and looked around him. This, he felt, was as good a place as any. He walked up to the counter. After all, he reassured himself, the man had told him to serve the papers in Washington, D.C., and here he was in Washington. And besides, the whole goddamn country was going to be blown to ant shit a few seconds after he had effective service, so nobody was ever likely to know even if he did goof it up. Hi, my name is Cindy. Can I take your order, please? Goldman froze. The papers were already in his hand. All he had to do was hand them to somebody, say what they were, and time jump out of here. Simple as that. He looked at the waitress and flexed his larynx.
Hi, he said. I'll have the double cheeseburger, the vanilla shake, regular, and, large fries.
Coming right up. He opened his mouth to say the next bit. This is a sealed copy of a possession order issued out of the Supreme Court, requiring you to surrender possession of the premises known as North America. If you are in any doubt as to the effect of this order or the likely consequences of failure to comply with the terms hereof, you should immediately seek the advice of your own legal adviser. But the waitress had gone. She now had her back to him and was yelling the order through to the kitchen. There was obviously more to process serving than he'd originally anticipated.
"Hi, I'm Aisha. Are you being served?"
Goldman stared into the friendly brown eyes in front of him, closed his own, thrust the papers over the counter, and said the magic words. They came out in a sort of congealed lump, like melted popcorn. "Excuse me," said the waitress. Now, the sensible thing to have done would have been to turn away quickly and run for it. Instead, Goldman made a fatal mistake. He tried to explain.
"Look," he said, "I'm a process server and—"
The brown eyes clouded over.
"Get out of here," they said. "I'm telling you, I never owned the goddamn car. I never signed nothing. What are you came in hassling for? What are you coming in here hassling me for?"
"No, it's not about a car," Goldman said. "In fact, it's not you personally, it's—"
"You wait there," said the brown eyes. "I'm gonna get the manageress."
Goldman winced.
No, there's no need for that," he said. "Look, it's perfectly in order for you to accept service. In fact, service has now been effectually affected, so—"
"Don't you give me none of that bullshit, man. I ain't signing nothing. You think I'm crazy or something?"
Meanwhile, a large man in a cook's hat had materialised from somewhere out back. Was there, he inquired, some sort of problem going on here?
"You bet there's a problem," said the brown eyes emphatically. "This guy here says he's a process server. I told him I ain't accepting no service. I ain't signing nothing. And he says—"
"That's all right," said the large man. "You just get caught and everything's gonna be fine."
A statement which turned out to be more accurate than he could possibly have imagined. The building began to move. It happened like this. The water from the Marianas Trench hits the boiler over number 6 furnace, and it turns to steam, which passes through a series of ports into an expansion chamber in the centre of the planet, fills the chamber, and starts to move upwards, bearing against the piston, which is driven with staggering force up towards the surface of the earth until it connects with and locates into a receiving slot on the underside of a 13,000-ton slab of Kevlar reinforced concrete directly under the biggest skyscraper in Kansas City, which is, of course, as near as to make no odds the geographical centre of the United States, whereupon the skyscraper is pushed up clear of its foundations into the air, but of course, thanks to the Da Vinci Project, it's linked with steel girders to all the neighbouring buildings, which in turn are linked to all the buildings across the entire nation, with the result that the force on the piston being exerted is, remember, absolutely phenomenal. Almost a quarter of the Pacific Ocean has been turned to steam by now, and the water's still coming, and when steam expands, it's got to go somewhere, and those steel girders they've got linking up all the houses aren't rubbish. They make the Golden Gate Bridge look like a cheap paperclip. So America rises, or at least the buildings do. The ground stays put. The ground, after all, now indefeasibly belongs to Lundqvist Trust Holdings Corporation and has to be surrendered in accordance with the notice to quit. On the other hand, the buildings are tenants' improvements and may be removed at any time prior to the surrender of the premises. Ask any lawyer. A split second after the moment of lifting, of course, the steam pressure in the cylinder blows out the gaskets. The piston goes crashing back down to the centre of the earth in a cloud of burning steam. The network of girders crumples under the strain like gossamer and falls away. But not so the buildings, because for the last 36 hours, all the birds in North America, under the direction of 2 extremely persuasive seagulls, have been feverishly occupied knotting helium-filled balloons to all the cup hooks screwed into all the roofs of all the buildings in every state in the Union. And the micron of a second before the whole thing is due to succumb to gravity and hit the deck, the balloons take the strain and America floats. some 20 feet or so above ground level. Fortuitously, it's a pretty windless day, and the birds have also tethered the buildings together to stop them drifting too far apart. They're now zooming from building to building, a pigeon's work is never done, with rope and plank bridges to take the place of the sidewalks. It goes without saying, incidentally, that the balloons are coloured red, white and blue, and have been neatly arranged to form an appropriate pattern when viewed from above. Lucky George got them cheap, as a job lot, surplus after the recent round of party conventions. And as a final touch, from the roof of the United Nations building in New York, 20,000 specially trained white doves take off and glide in perfect formation across the city and out over Long Island. As they fly, they spell out, "OK, Kurt, she's all yours." Until, as they pass over Port Jefferson and turn north towards New Haven, they change formation and instead read, "Enjoy." Somewhere in the city of London, a young stockbroker dashed into the firm's main office, tore off his coat and tucked his long knees under his computer terminal. Preoccupied with his own concerns, he failed to notice the deathly hush. "Sorry, my late, everyone," he said generally. "Update me, someone. Bow Street gone any higher since we opened?" One of his colleagues turned his head and gave him a long, strange look. "In a manner of speaking, yes," he said. "Impossible. On the following grounds. A. No labour force, however well equipped or motivated, spectral or otherwise, could dig the tunnels, machine the parts, install the girders, blow up the balloons in so short a time. Nothing was ever built that quickly. OK, the world was put together in 7 days, but that's networking time. What the Book of Words glosses over is the 3 weeks between day 2 and day 3, during which time he sat around twiddling his thumbs waiting for 40 billion reinforced steel joists to be delivered from the foundry. B. There isn't enough water in the ocean, let alone in the Marianas Trench, to provide enough steam to lift America. Or C. Alternatively, the design as specified would have produced so much force that not only would America have lifted, but Manhattan Island would have been shot out through the Earth's atmosphere and into flipping orbit. D. In any event, it's academic, because that much pressure would blow apart any cylinder small enough to fit inside the Earth's core in 3 seconds flat. E. Besides which, absolutely no way could you join all the buildings in the USA together like that, and if you could, it's completely out of the question that any steel framework built by man could withstand the leverage you'd get under the Da Vinci design. F. Not to mention the fact that even if you could get all those houses and factories and office blocks to go up, it'd take more than a few poxy little balloons to keep them there. Correct. Impossible. America swayed in the slight breeze. Gradually, her population began to come to terms with it. True, they were hanging out of the sky from balloons, but once the rope and plank bridges were in place, they tentatively began to venture out, not looking down, trying very hard indeed not to think about it at all. Within 2 hours, the first rope and plank bridge theatre performers were miming the man inside a box routine 20 feet above Central Park. True, there were no fields to plough, no lumber to jack, worst of all, no roads to drive on. Take away America's cars and you take away her soul. But within an hour and a half, the first Mac airship was bobbing drunkenly across Arizona airspace, country music blaring from the cockpit, the propulsive force being provided by propelling 5,000 rubber bands. True, with no mean streets, there was nowhere for a man to walk down, and for the first 40 minutes all the cops in all the precincts in all the states of the Union suddenly found themselves with no excuse whatsoever for not catching up with paperwork. But there are too many rooftop chase sequences in cinema history for the lack of streets to be a problem for terribly long. True, nobody had the faintest idea what was going on, or what was all behind it, or whose fault it was, or how long it was going to last. In other words, normality, the status quo. Lucky George gritted his teeth and wondered whether, this time, he hadn't been just a trifle over-ambitious. No trouble at all lifting America by sheer magical force. Keeping it there, child's play. Suspending the disbelief of the entire human race, piece of cake. putting the idea of staying indoors into the mind of every man, woman and child in America, well, a doddle, and just as easy to do then simultaneously as one after the other. Where perhaps he had overextended himself slightly was in doing all this and trying to make it look as though it was possible, hence the business with tunnels, furnaces, pistons and steel girders. Essential, nevertheless. Where there are laws, there are lawyers, and the lawyers who enforce the laws of physics are arguably the nastiest ornaments of a universally unsavoury profession. Goof around with relativity or try having an action without an equal and opposite reaction, and the next thing you know is the usher telling you to speak up because the judge can't hear you. Bearing in mind the number of times Lucky George had disregarded the simple instructions set out in the universe's user's manuals, he'd forget that breaking every single law in the book, apart from parking in the director of gravity's reserved space, without at least some show of mechanical activity, would be pushing his luck just that smidgen too far. Hence all the ironmongery. Right now the site was swarming with feasibility assessors and reality surveyors, all scratching their heads over the fact that although, according to the rules, it could not possibly work, there was a hell of a lot of existential evidence that it actually did, and maybe the rules were in need of a little discreet revision. By the time they'd done their sums and could prove it was all physically impossible, there was a better than average chance that the mess would have been sorted out and America could be put unostentatiously back sometime in the early hours of the morning when all the inhabitants were asleep or watching the late film. Fine. But it made things that bit harder, like trying to break into a hard-boiled egg with a lead-weighted feather. Instead of just keeping the houses in the air, for example, he was having to do it by means of all those countless millions of balloons. You could put your mind out, lifting something like that the wrong way. Accordingly, George was rather preoccupied, with the result that he didn't hear the soft splash of oars below the balcony, or see the shadowy figure climb hand over hand up to the railings and silently hoist himself over. The first he knew of it, in fact, was the feel of the muzzle of the .40 Glock in his ear and Lundqvist's voice saying, "Freeze!" Hee hee. So, what will be happening next? We have chapter 18 coming up in the next couple of days, which is another quite hefty chapter, if I do say so myself. And then 19, 20, 21 to 22 are actually quite a bit shorter, so we could even do those. Well, 19 is still quite big. But anyway, I appreciate you listening. I appreciate your support and the fact that you're always here, and I must apologise again for the flakiness, but as one wise person very kindly told me, in that the fact that they can see very much that you guys are all amazing and supportive, and you are the kindest beings in the world. Yes, we love you to bits. You're awesome. Don't scares away, worries for another day, let the music play. Down at Fraggle Rock. That's a little bit of a tune for the day, but I also know the Muppet Babies theme, and one of my party tricks is I can actually... This is so pathetic. I can sing the Muppet Babies theme tune with all of the voices. They might not be the best impressions in the world, but I generally sing through and do all of the different voices. And I used to do it with Fraggle Rock as well, but I couldn't remember the next line, so that's why I stopped singing it there and then. It's the doozers part, and I love the doozers because they're awesome. Anywho, my lovely beans. So, hopefully back with another chapter in a couple of days, but it's been a bit flaky right now, but hopefully things are going to settle down. Famous last words. I said that only a couple of months ago and it all went to crap in the funniest way possible. It all went Pete Tong if you're a Gen Xer, and in the UK you'd certainly know that phrase. I digress. Thank you for being here. I do appreciate you being here, and if you'd like to leave a comment or get in touch via email, please do so. Feel free, and I always respond as best I can. And if you do want to listen to any of my Audible audiobooks, I would be more than happy to give any of you a free listen at a free promotional code for Audible. And all I ask is, if you do want to do this, if you want to do a rating, absolutely awesome. If you want to do a review, flipping Henry, that would be amazing. But you don't have to. But as I said, if I can give back in some other way for your wonderful support and encouragement, then I'm more than happy to do so. So, you guys are phenomenal. Big hugs and loves, and stay safe. Keep warm or keep hydrated and keep smiling. Look after yourselves. Get lots of good sleep if you're able to. Get some naps if you're not. We know how it all goes. And take it easy, Petal. I'll see you in a couple of days. And as I said, if you can share, like, subscribe, any of those would be great. And hit that notifications bell, and let's keep them hamsters happy. Take it easy, Petal. See you later.